Yo, what's up everyone? Seth here. Wanted to make a video today because in the last 48 hours I've had some really interesting stuff happen to me. Um, as you can tell from the title, um, I say my grandmother lied to my father. And the reason I say that is because about 2 days ago, I found out through a DNA test, the 23andMe DNA test, that my my dad's father, my grandfather, was actually not his blood grandfather. So, and my uncle, my dad's next oldest brother, um, got his DNA back, and it showed that he was actually my first cousin, which he isn't, but it was about half as strong genetic relation as it should be, meaning that he was my dad's half brother from a different father than my dad, meaning that I have a different grandfather. So naturally, I was just really curious and wanting to find out more about who this mysterious guy was. Um, Turns out there was a rumor always floating around in my dad's side of the family that he was from a different father. The last week or two that my grandmother was alive, apparently she said this guy's name many times or several times. His name was Price Shirley. As you know, my last name is Cohen. And a little bit more about my dad. He was one of 8 children. My grandmother had him and then waited 10 years and had 7 more kids in a row. And my dad was much taller than the rest of his family. And when I did some research into this guy, Price Shirley, I found out that he was just like my dad, and same size, very gregarious like my dad, very quizzical like my dad, very entrenched in nature and mechanics, and so kind of a lot of things made sense. And part of me kind of wished that my grandmother had been more truthful with my dad. Because I think it would have been really interesting and helped my dad out a lot to be raised by someone who was so similar to him. That being said, both my grandmother and my grandfather that I grew up with were amazing people. My grandfather was a POW, traded his wedding ring for like a slice of bread. He didn't talk much about that story. My grandmother raised all these children, was just an amazing, amazing person. I know it was different times back then, and so, you know, I can't blame her, but I wanted to make this video because I hope all you guys are being truthful in your lives, and as I'm trying to do. It's pretty hard, but also hope you guys are all having a fun time in your lives. Just remember, you can reach out to me anytime, and with that, I want to read you this story that I found out about Price. My grandfather was a really badass dude, and like I said, when I read the story, I read it about 3 or 4 times now. It made me pretty much tear up almost every time, so I'm going to try not to tear up, but really fucking awesome story. So with that, let's get into it. The name of this story is The Last Gobbler. It's a pretty short story, about 9 pages long. I thought you guys would really enjoy it. So this story is called The Last Gobbler by Bruce Brady. Here's a little intro. This is a true story. It's about a man named Price Shirley, a turkey hunter who was the victim of a terrible hunting accident that left him blind. When Bruce Brady first told me about Shirley and his last gobbler, I really wondered whether hunters would want to read such a story, but Bruce insisted on writing it anyway. Then, when I read about Price Shirley's hunt, I knew it was a lesson in inner strength for all of us. Outdoor Life published The Last Gobbler in April of 1981, and it's a story not easily forgotten. It was 3 a.m. when Price Shirley's alarm clock awoke him on the morning of April 8, 1969. Taking care not to disturb his wife, he eased out of bed, slipped into his camouflage coveralls, and double-checked his equipment. Assured that his collars, head net, shells, and knife were in their proper pockets, he shouldered his old Browning 12-gauge automatic and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Outside it was a dead calm. As was his custom, he looked up into the pre-dawn sky. Overhead, the stars sparkled brightly, bringing him promise of turkey gobbling and another beautiful spring day in the Mississippi woods. At 3:15 a.m., Shirley joined a hunting companion for breakfast at a Macomb cafe. After a hearty breakfast, they began the 11-mile drive to some woods in Amite County where the morning's hunt would take place. Shirley had scouted the woods a number of times to locate turkeys and to study their movements. 2 afternoons before, he had made a blind of natural vegetation on a low ridge where he anticipated the turkeys would move after they came off the roost. Shirley planned to position his companion in this blind. At 4:45 a.m., the two men stepped from the truck and began the 3/4-mile hike that would take them to the hunting area. In due course, the blind was located and Shirley's friend took his seat. Shirley then continued on for a safe distance before sitting down with his back to a large pine. About 5:50 a.m., Shirley began to putt occasionally with his diaphragm mouth collar. 2 hens answered his calls, and at about 6:45 a.m. they flew off their roost to the ground. Shirley attempted to call them up, hoping that a silent gobbler would be present when they came into view. After about 15 minutes of intermittent calling, Shirley looked around and saw his companion approaching. He motioned to reveal his position and looked back in the direction when he expected the turkeys to appear. Shirley's companion had indeed seen the movement, but to him it looked exactly like a gobbler's head, and he shouldered his gun for the shot. When Shirley glanced back a moment later, he looked into the muzzle of a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with 3-inch Magnum shells at a range of 22 yards. He waved again, but it was too late. The gun roared, sending a load of number 6 shot crashing into Shirley's face. It was a terrible accident, recalls J.E. Thornhill, Jr. of Macomb, Mississippi, who was a close friend of Price Shirley. It always is when one friend shoots another. Price somehow survived, but he was totally blind for the rest of his life. Thornhill believes the accident would have killed a lesser man. Shirley was a powerful specimen, standing 6 feet 5 inches and weighing more than 250 pounds. He looked as though he could play defensive end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, says Thornhill. Price Shirley worked as a locomotive engineer for the Illinois Central Railroad, but he was better known for his hunting and fishing abilities. He was generally acknowledged to be one of the finest turkey hunters in South Mississippi. Stories of his calling ability and hunting prowess were legion. He was 50 years old at the time of the accident. He hunted all Mississippi game, from deer to doves, but turkey hunting was his first love. He was also expert at hand-grabbing big catfish. It is said that Price Shirley had an uncanny sense for touch for big fish. Once he had located a catfish in a hollow log, or up under a washed-out riverbank, he could take a twig and by feeling the fish estimate within ounces what the catfish would weigh when he finally wrestled it out of its lair. Because he was such a successful hunter and hand-grabber, Thornhill recalls, he was sometimes labeled as an outlaw by those who were jealous of his success. But in all my years of field with Price, I never saw him outlaw any game. Shirley had always been a happy, sociable man, but after he lost his sight, he became brooding and morose. Eventually, he began hand-grabbing again, for it is touch and not sight that is important in this unique sport. On fishing trips, he seemed to come out of his shell and revert to the old Price again. But when spring came and the scent of blooming dogwood filled the air, Price Shirley really hurt. I guess there were just too many old gobblers in his mind for him to accept the fact that he had bagged his last one, Thornhill reckons. He recalls a day when he paid Price a visit. They sat on the porch and enjoyed a good talk about bygone days they had shared in the field. It was dusk and I was about to leave when Price asked me to stay a minute longer, Thornhill remembers. He went inside and returned with his old Browning autoloader in his hands. He said it was too good a turkey gun not to be in the field, and he wanted to pass it along to me. I insisted on paying for his shotgun. Driving home that evening, I realized that Price had finally accepted the fact that he could never bag another gobbler. When I got home, I put my gun in the rack, and I've used Price's Browning since that day. Thornhill and other friends occasionally took Shirley with them on late afternoon rides through the big woods, where they would stop and listen for turkeys to gobble as they flew up to the roost at twilight. I could never tell from Price's reaction whether these outings helped or hurt him, Thornhill recalls. I do know he liked to give advice to hunters who were having problems with smart gobblers. He listened carefully as the hunter told him about it. He would ask countless questions about the way the birds reacted to various calls and the lay of the land. Then he would suggest a series of calls to try or encourage a change in the position of the hunter's blind. He always expected a report on how his advice had worked. I could sense his mental involvement and the pleasure he got from the tales I told him about smart turkeys I tried to work. Thornhill recalls that Shirley's physical adjustment to blindness was rapid. When Price had his sight, he was an amazing woodsman, he said. He used all his senses. I learned a great deal from him when we were in the field together. I suppose being blind served to sharpen his already remarkable remaining senses. He could identify men by the sound of their walk and women by the scent of their cosmetics and the perfume they used. Thornhill considered taking Shirley along on a hunt so he could listen to the calling and gobbling, but when he thought about how tough it is to negotiate turkey woods where speed is often critical, he was afraid it would be too difficult for Price. He decided that if he ever roosted a bird alongside a road, he would invite Price to come along. But that perfect situation never seemed to appear. Then, about 3 years after the accident, the spring turkey season rolled around. Halfway through the season, Thornhill located a good gobbling turkey and tried to call him into range. The old Tom resisted his most enticing calls for 6 days straight. Finally, I asked Price for advice, Thornhill told me. I told him everything I could remember about each hunt, recalling as many specific details as possible. He listened intently, quizzing me when I failed to make some point clear. While we talked, I remembered how his eyes used to sparkle when we plotted against an old boss gobbler. At last he settled back in his chair and said, "There's some obstacle between you and your turkey. A fence, a thicket, a creek. There is some spot of ground that he chooses not to cross. You have two options. Come in from another direction or make him overcome his fear." A creek wound through those woods, and I told Price I had never been able to get a gobbler to fly across a creek. A big grin spread across his face, and he said, "Well, that's one difference between you and me. I never had that problem." I wanted that gobbler badly, but I wanted even more to see if Price could call him across the creek. So without really considering the consequences, I told him I would pick him up at 4 a.m. He would do the calling, and I would do the shooting. At first, he made no reply. He just sat there behind those dark glasses. Then I detected the trace of a smile, and he said he would be ready. At dawn, the two men were half a mile into the deep woods. They stood in silence as the sounds of a new day grew louder. Then, way across the bottom, an owl hooted, and an old turkey gobbled from his roost tree in reply. Arm in arm, the hunters moved forward several hundred yards while the turkey continued to gobble. Thornhill helped Shirley take his seat at the base of a big tree. While he cut branches and fashioned a blind, Shirley raked away ground litter where they would sit side by side. As Thornhill sat down at his friend's left side, the turkey gobbled from the ground. He was off the roost. Price put his mouth collar into place and began making a series of excited clucks, and the turkey answered immediately, as I knew he would, Thornhill recalled. Then, for the next half hour, Price and the bird exchanged calls. We would course the bird easily because he was so vocal. I knew he was nearing the creek where he had stopped each day to gobble and strut for another hour. I whispered this information to Price, but he only replied, "Sit still." The gobbler did in fact stop at the creek, which was 80 yards or so away in front of the blind. He strutted and gobbled on the far side of the stream, walking back and forth over a 50-yard area. The tom raged and gobbled for 30 minutes, but Shirley made no reply. Thornhill strained his eyes for a glimpse of the turkey. And then the gobbler hushed. I began to wonder if he had crossed the creek and was coming in, or if he had found some hens and was moving away, Thornhill said. I was about to tell Price to call again when the turkey gobbled some distance away from his strutting area. Instantly, Price began a call I had never heard before. It was a series of loud and broken cackles with some shrill whines and excited putts thrown in. The tom answered with a double gobble, and then we heard his heavy wings beating. I didn't see him, but I could hear him as he flew across the creek and pitched in to our left front. I figured the turkey would come in from the left on Price's side of the blind, but it wasn't until I put my finger on the safety that it occurred to me to pass the shotgun to Price. He was making some soft clucks and purrs when I silently pushed the gun across his lap. "You kill him," I whispered. "I'll help you kill him, Price." When Shirley moved his hands to the smooth-worn stock of the Browning, he whispered, "This is my gun." It was Price's old turkey gun. By this time, my heart was in my throat, Thornhill says. Having that gobbler on our side of the creek was thrilling, but what we were about to try had me breathing so hard I was afraid the turkey would hear me. All this time, Price sat there like a man made of stone. Minutes passed before the turkey gobbled again. They could tell he was 50 or 60 yards away now, but still out of sight. Luckily, he was still off to the left where the barrel of Price's gun pointed as it lay across his lap. Thornhill said a silent prayer that the bird would hold his course. And then he gobbled again, loud enough to knock off your hat, and Price let go a loud cackle right back at him, much louder than I would have dared to call, Thornhill continued. The turkey answered with a quick gobble, and Price countered with another cackle, to which the turkey double gobbled. Price had blown that turkey's mind, and I knew then it was only a matter of time before he came up. I prayed he would come in so Price could get a shot. We could hear the heavy drone of his strut and the rasping of his wingtips as they dragged the ground. He was moving slightly to the left again. I looked past the tip of Price's nose in an effort to see him. Then suddenly he appeared. He was in full strut and every bit as big and beautiful as I knew he would be. His head was a flaming red with wattles as big as buckshot. His beard was a black stripe down his bronze breast. My heart was pounding as I whispered, "There he is!" and Price silently slipped off the safety. The turkey stood motionless for several seconds and then moved slowly forward. When he stopped, he was no more than 40 yards away. The turkey's head was behind the trunk of a big pine. Thornhill whispered to Price to shoulder his gun, which he did in one fluid motion. With the fingers of his right hand, Thornhill touched Price's right elbow and pushed gently. Price responded, and the muzzle of the gun moved to the left. Thornhill looked down the side of the barrel and whispered, "Up, up some more," and he saw the barrel settle on the half-hidden gobbler. "Right there," he whispered, and Price froze the gun in place. From where I sat, I was looking down the side of the barrel. As strong as Price surely was, I knew in my heart that he would hold the gun steady for as long as it might take to get the shot. Probably only seconds passed, but it dragged like hours while the two men sat waiting. The thought crossed Thornhill's mind that Price had to kill this turkey. He hadn't considered what failure might do to his friend. Now it came to him that the next moment might destroy Price Shirley. A miss, now, might accomplish what a magnum load of number 6s had failed to do on another turkey hunt. Finally, the gobbler stepped out, but he was partly screened by underbrush. He angled slightly to the left again, and again Thornhill pressed Price's elbow. The muzzle inched to the left, and then the turkey stepped clear of the brush. "Shoot!" Thornhill whispered, and the Browning roared. Price held the gun, Thornhill reflects. The good Lord must have been with him, because the turkey went down with feathers flying. Thornhill sprang to his feet, dancing and yelling, "You got him, Price! You did it!" But when he looked down at Shirley, he was just sitting there with the shotgun across his lap. "I always went straight to my turkey," Price said quietly. Thornhill turned and ran to the fallen gobbler. He was a fine turkey with a 9.5-inch beard and long hooked spurs. He carried him back to the blind man and placed the great bird across his legs. Price's fingers worked their way to the spurs first, and he ran his thumb and index finger over them. Then he stroked the heavy beard and felt the tips of the wings, which had been worn blunt by strutting. He hefted the turkey and guessed the big tom's weight at 20 pounds. I couldn't tell from the way Price reacted to the kill how he felt about it at all, Thornhill remembers. I didn't know what I should say, so I didn't say anything. Price came to his feet, so I picked up the turkey and the gun and we started back to the truck. He took hold of my right forearm and we slowly worked our way out of the woods. On the ride home, Price was quiet, and I understood. I knew he was thinking about everything that had taken place that morning, and that he would come to some conclusion about what it all meant to him. I was worried sick that it had all been a tragic mistake, and that killing the Tom would prevent Price from coming to terms with his blindness. We must have been about halfway home when a grin crossed Price's face, and he said, "I knew we would take him when he double-gobbled on our side of the creek." Relief swept over me, and we began to talk about every call Price had made, every answer the turkey had given, and every touch I had made on Price's elbow. All the tension vanished, and we laughed and congratulated each other on our 1,000,000-to-1 shot hunt. We were almost home when Price asked, "He's still in the bed of our truck, ain't he?" I glanced around and assured him the turkey was there. "Good," he said with a smile. "A turkey isn't yours for sure till you close the oven door." The two men showed that turkey all over the county and told the story of the hunt 100 times, and that hunt remained the high point of Price Shirley's life the rest of his days. He died in 1976 of natural causes not related to his hunting accident. "It was a crazy idea, and we didn't set out to do it," J.E. Thornhill told me. I don't think we could have done it again, but we did it that time, Price and me, and if I take 1,000 turkeys before I'm done, none of them will ever mean as much to me as Price Shirley's Last Gobbler." Well, guys, thank you for watching the video and sharing that story with me. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you want to see some more videos. And I will catch you guys on the flip side. Like I said, stay truthful, value your friends and family, have a great time in life, and much love. Peace out, guys.